Olá, eu sou a Cibele e hoje eu e o João Pentem estamos aqui com o Roger Jackson. A gente vem com o tema de Shopper Intelligence. Ele é um dos grandes players nesse mercado no mundo, então é uma grande honra tê-lo aqui. Roger, first of all, I'd like to thank you for accepting our invitation. Could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you, the work of your company, Shopper Intelligence?
Absolutely, no problem. Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. Yes, Shopper Intelligence has been working for the last 17 years or so at the interface between consumer goods manufacturers and retailers, mainly supermarket retailers. We started in Australia and now we're in about 10 countries worldwide doing what we do. The underlying idea is pretty simple, is that rather than each consumer goods manufacturer occasionally doing their own research about certain categories or a retailer occasionally doing certain research about aspects of the store, why don't we systematize it? Why don't we measure all the categories and all the retailers with the shoppers in one standardized process for the industry, and then people can subscribe to that database. So what we do is we survey shoppers week in, week out, thousands of shoppers a year, and we ask them fundamental questions about their experience of buying a category in a supermarket. So we ask about the most recent purchase they made. And with that data, we can then help manufacturers and retailers understand far better how each category plays within the store and how one retailer differs to another. So think about it as a big data cube with kind of categories down the side and retailers across the top. And we figured out the sort of 20 or 30 crucial questions that you have to ask the shopper to know the answer to. They're not things you can get from loyalty card data or from panel data or from scan sales data. They're questions you need to ask the shopper. And that's what we do. So it's a database in each of these countries, and then we offer a subscription to it.
And Roger, in the age of that data, everyone talks about understanding the shopper. But what truly differentiates a retailer or a brand that uses data intelligently from those who simply collect numbers?
Well, that's the massive question, isn't it? I mean, goodness knows everybody's inundated with data. Um, I think that the truth about using data intelligently is always to work backwards from the problem. Is first of all, we ask ourselves, what's our problem? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to achieve? And go to the data with the end in mind. Don't just look at data and hope to find something, right? I came across a process that was beautifully named answer first. And you could argue that's just another word for saying have a hypothesis. But it's about using your instinct, your knowledge, your observations, your awareness of what's going on in your market to actually consider what may be the challenges and the issues, then go to the data to find evidence. I think that really differentiates intelligent use of data from just blind analysis. And these days with computers, you can generate hundreds of charts in seconds, right? And then you drown in it because there's just too much to try and understand. Everyone talks about AI, by the way, being able to help with this, but I've not seen great AI analysis coming yet. So the human factor of using your imagination and all your previous knowledge to ask the right question, I think, is absolutely crucial.
Roger, can you tell me about some of the biggest myths regarding shopping behavior that shopper intelligence data has debunked?
Gosh, where do I start? I mean, my pet hobby horse is actually system one and system two. And I don't want to dig myself a big hole and argue with professional psychologists or let alone brain scientists. But I know from talking to brain scientists, there's no such thing as system one and system two. But the problem that we have is with that simple model in mind, we tend to start to say shoppers can't tell us anything. They're like automatic robots going around a supermarket. They just acting on their emotional whims, their instincts, their system one's at work all the time. So don't bother talking to the shoppers, right? Because they haven't the faintest idea what's going on. And that's just so totally untrue. Having been asking shoppers questions about their shopping for years now and looking at the data, shoppers know a lot about what they're trying to achieve and the reasons why they do things. And of course, you got to be careful what you ask and how you ask it. But I think we all know from our personal experience, We know, like, we've got a dinner coming up. We know who's coming for dinner. We know what we're planning to cook. We know what we're coming to buy. The idea that we are sort of completely, what's the word, autonomous robots in our shopping is not true. So I think one of the things we do is that we would always ask clients when we show data that we've got from talking to shoppers, does it make sense? And it always makes sense. You know, what we do is we measure all the categories in the store. So you can look at cola soft drinks, you can look at diapers, you can look at bananas, and we get a different data set. Same questions, but obviously the data is different for every category, and you can rank them from highest to lowest, and you can understand how categories differ to each other. And it always makes intuitive sense. You know, shoppers do make sense. I think people make sense if you ask them the right questions and you listen appropriately. So I think one of the things we have debunked is this idea that shoppers don't know what they're doing or why they're doing it. Sometimes maybe that's the case. Maybe you pick something up kind of randomly in a relatively unthinking way. But a lot of the time when we talk about people not thinking much, it's because it's a habit. And, you know, I don't need to rethink my choices for instant coffee every time I go to buy instant coffee because I've already done it a lot of times. I'm not a robot. I'm not thinking about it. I'm just not wasting effort. And it is one of the things we ask about where shoppers want to put effort. So they don't want to spend time and effort buying dishwash powder, for example. No offense to dishwash powder. Reckitt Benckiser is one of our biggest clients, but it's not something you want to invest much of your life in once a month. Whereas choosing the right dishes to serve for dinner to friends tomorrow, that's a really important issue. So you want to invest time in that. So I think people are quite logical in how they go about shopping. They're not robotic. They just make choices about where to put effort.
And Roger, over the past few years, 17 years, how have people's shopping habits changed? Is there any data that particularly surprised you in this regard?
I think one of the things from doing our work for many years is actually the rate of change is slow. And I think the idea that people change the way they shop dramatically is just not true. You know, we are creatures of habit. Supermarket shopping is something we learn and we do. And it's like you go look at a supermarket today and compare it to a supermarket 5 years ago. It's not very different. So I think some of the behaviors are quite fundamental and they won't change. The obvious thing is the impact of online shopping. And I think the other thing that I see in the data that I think is really interesting is the impact that's had on younger shoppers coming through. So the family shopper of today, and let's face it, the core business for most supermarkets and most consumer goods companies are families. They're the big baskets. So a generation is coming through who are now the family shopper who grew up on the internet. And we see quite a lot of evidence in our data just how intolerant they are for spending too much time, how they need more help, and they're frustrated more quickly. And they're used to the internet making things incredibly easy. So when they come to a physical store, they're quite frustrated by it. It's quite interesting. We see that younger shoppers do find supermarkets quite frustrating. It's difficult to know, I'll be honest, whether that was always the case because you're young and you've got small children and life is pretty frazzled and frustrating anyway. Do you then find shopping even more frustrating? But my gut feel is that younger people are they're expecting their suppliers, the people who sell them products and services, to give them a much more straightforward experience. And things like queuing at checkouts, it's like an anathema to a generation X, right? You know, you don't queue online, you just press your button and you buy it, and then Amazon delivers it later. So things like queues, things like not being able to find things like lack of information about maybe products they don't know very well can be very frustrating. Whereas I think their parents' generation were a little bit more tolerant to having to do more work in the process. I mean, let's face it, the supermarket was designed with the wonderful idea we'll get the shoppers to do all the work, you know, compared with having someone used to serve you in a little shop. Supermarkets give the task to the shopper. And I have a wonder whether that's going full circle now. And the younger shoppers are starting to go, hang on a minute, I'm not prepared to do all that legwork. It's too frustrating.
And is there any story where shopper intelligence insights made a significant impact, something that truly changes the game for a company?
Gosh, yes, it's we see it over and over again that the issue we tend to tackle is when a CPG firm and a retailer meet, how much of the discussion is based on some assumptions. And those assumptions can be very, very dangerous. And sometimes the risk of looking at just the mechanical numbers on their own and not thinking about the shopper hard enough is very dangerous. The story that sticks in my mind was a supplier supplying actually vegetarian food products to Tesco in the UK. And because there was quite a wide range of vegetarian foods in Tesco, I think it was in the frozen section actually, doing the rate of sale analysis from best to worst for the freezer cabinet, a lot of these lines were very small sellers. So logically, the buyer said, look, I'm just going to delist half of these because they're not giving me a good return on my shelf space. I need to get rid of these small selling lines, typical supermarket. I only want to have the best sellers, right? Because that's how I make money. Our data, however, and in fact, they did delist it, and the supplier was living for a year with half their range delisted. So this was a huge hit. You can imagine the amount of business they lost. And they couldn't find an argument that would get Tesco to change their mind because the rate of sale data was very objectively factual. You can't argue with rate of sale data. But we uncovered one very simple fact. I think one fact changed the argument, which was that for a vegetarian food shopper in Tesco, the number one success criteria for the shopper was choice. So the thing they made a priority above anything else was having a good choice of vegetarian food. And then once you realize that, suddenly it unlocks an insight, which is, hang on a minute, if I'm buying vegetarian food, all the rest of the stuff in the freezer cabinet's of no interest to me. So it doesn't matter that you've got lots of sausages and chicken and bacon and all those good selling lines. I'm never going to buy them because I'm a vegetarian. And they realized that in cutting the range down of the vegetarians, the risk was they would lose those shoppers to the store. So they would go somewhere else to find the choice of vegetarian food. So not only will they not trade up to something else, they won't just swap and buy something else in the fixture. They will go to another store. And that was an argument that was incredibly difficult to quantify objectively without some strong external data that was sourced directly from the shopper. And I think to me, that remains one of the most compelling examples where a shopper-based fact changes the discussion. And this, I mean, it's a small example, but it applies day in, day out across the world as manufacturers work with retailers, is that for all the data we have, and it's very scientific these days, we can lose sight of the human being that's on the other side of the checkout, the person who's actually making the decision. And they don't think the way we think. They think about solving their problems. If they can't solve their problems, they will go somewhere else. So I think, and I've got lots of examples like that, but sometimes it seems quite small, and sometimes it's just like one number. One number, if it kind of says something no one has actually thought about clearly, is a massive shift in perspective. The other discussion I like to show is talking to a very well-known confectionery company and just asking a room full of marketing executives whether chocolate was an impulse category or planned category. And of course, when asked to vote, everybody said it's an impulse category because intuitively, chocolate's an impulse product, right? In fact, it's classified in the supermarket as an impulse category. So it has this big label that's impulse. In fact, more shoppers plan their purchase of chocolate in a supermarket than don't. Doesn't mean it's not very impulsive relative to all the other categories. It's still right at the top of the list. But actually, there's a lot of planning in the chocolate category in a context of a supermarket. And I was able to say to that audience, does that change the way you think about how you promote the category? If more people are coming to the store intending to buy chocolate than you actually thought. And it did. It was like, well, we've got to rethink this because we're transferring an expectation maybe from small stores, from kiosks and petrol forecourts, just transferring into the supermarket. And we've labeled the category impulse. For the supermarket, it is because it's more impulse for the rest. But this simple fact that actually it's more planned than you thought was changing their trade marketing strategy there and then. And I'm pretty sure that made them a lot of money in the long term. So sometimes it's things that just shift the dial in terms of the perception of strategy and who you're working with in terms of the shopper and what they need and what they want. And I love it when that happens. And one of the things we do in almost every meeting is we ask people what they currently think, and then we show the number. And the number of times, maybe not everybody in the room is wrong, but often you'll get from 15 people 15 different numbers, and most of them are wrong. And it's that sort of, that we think we understand the shopper, but without talking to the shopper, often we're making guesses.
And Roger, you are one of Shopnosi's main partners in the world. And here in Brazil, we have a representation of there too. Tell us about a case of a client of yours who had a successful case using Shopnosi's data, the technology.
Well, the wonderful example that we had, and I better not name names because this is proprietary data, but again, it was a confectionery company, I can say that. They discovered they had confectionery was being displayed on a gondola end, which they paid a lot of money for. But in the store we did the test, the confectionery gondola end was after the confectionery aisle in the flow. So confectionery was before the gondola end. The gondola end in the period we were analyzing, which was I think was a whole week, not a single bar of whatever or box of whatever it was sold on that gondola end, not one. There was zero sales from a gondola end, and everybody was just completely shocked. It was one of those things you're almost kind of white-faced in the reality of going, how can a gondola end that we're paying money for sell no product? But the observation is quite simple, really, that if people are going around the store and they go through confectionery, they'll buy their confectionery the first time they get to confectionery. There's no point in having confectionery displayed. The second thing, it was the same company, because then they commissioned some more work, and we were looking at some of the impacts of standalone display units. And I think we researched putting a standalone display unit in 2, 3, or 4 different places. There was one location, I'm not going to say where it was, where they got 5 times the rate of sale from any other location in the store, 5 times the impact. And then the MD said to us, it was the simplest thing I ever did in my business. I just told all the sales force that they wouldn't get a bonus of building a display unless it was in this place. So, because you know what happens when you have a field sales force, they do a big display. They ask the store manager, where can we build the display? The store manager goes, oh, there's a space over there, build it there. They build it, take a nice picture, send it off to head office. And then the people who've got the best displays get a bonus, right? So there's no discussion about where that display needs to be to achieve better results. So just having a fact, and they could go to the store manager with this fact and say, look, we have proven you will sell most if we put it here. So it's not like they haven't got evidence to back it. And I think the net conclusion, we moved money from buying gondola ends to paying for displays. And we told the sales force where to put that display. And our results are dramatically changed. I don't think he told me the actual uplift, but it was like one of the best ROI he'd ever got on a piece of research. But it's amazing when you think about it, how much of our work in consumer goods is without this kind of insight. What goes on inside a store is a bit of a mystery. We see what comes out the till because we've got all that data. But between the shopper walking in and walking out with a product, it's all a bit of a mystery, right? So I think anything we can learn to help shopper marketers, trade marketers make better decisions, there's got to be a good ROI, because there's a lot of money changing hands based on, I think, not a lot of insight at the moment.
And if you could predict the future of retail based on the insights you've gathered during these years, what would be the 3 biggest trends for the 5 next years?
Oh, I think the thing that's just around the corner, and this is going to be the revolution, is the basics of your shop, the low involvement categories, the household basics. Is going to be almost an entirely automated process. We're close to it now with online shopping. The website throws up, this is what you normally buy. Do you want to buy these things again? But you can imagine these big stores that are out there that really struggle to use all their space in these days. A lot of that space is going to be turned over to robotic micro fulfillment centers. So imagine a supermarket that's half robots and half people. You're going to go into the people part, and it's going to be beautifully displayed. There's lots of lovely things to try. There's samplings, demonstrations, information, a very experiential, because you just put more time and money into that. And then when you get to the end, there's just going to be a box to pick up with all the other stuff that you don't want to forget that's been ordered for you automatically and packed by a robot. So stripping out the boring bits of the shop from the interesting bits of the shop, I think is going to be a massive shift. And it goes back to what I was saying before about the younger folk just wanting their lives to be made easier. I've seen a lot of tech out there that promises some pretty affordable robotics. So I think that would be just a massive change in terms of how the last few feet is operated for the shoppers, and a big change for shopper marketers as well, because suddenly we're going to, kind of some of our tools are going to be removed in terms of the traditions of how we do things. And maybe some of that's a good thing, because, I mean, from where I sit, our industry has been sucked into this crazy world of just endless price promotion. And it's like brand A's on a big price deal this week, brand B's on the same price deal the next week, and they swap backwards and forwards endlessly, all fighting just to get their little bit of attention and to make sure they keep their volumes up. Strip all of that out, and there's a lot more, a lot less waste in terms of promotional inefficiency. And I think that's the other thing that's going to happen, is supply chains will get more efficient in this process. I mean, apart from that, I think other shopper trends are well discussed. There's obviously a value trend because of inflation and pressures on income, that a lot of shoppers are chasing value. Then you've obviously got the counterpoint that people are looking for small pleasures and kind of more interesting things. And those two trends are always there, right? There's the price pressure, and there's the pressure to make things kind of nicer and better as a flip side. So those continue to be there. The demand for healthy products and environmentally friendly stuff, that's ever growing. So yes, I mean, I think that the technology changes are the ones that are going to be the most impactful. And how will AI impact it? I guess more and more automation of the online purchasing process, where it gets smarter and smarter at knowing what you want and figuring out how you're going to buy it. I saw a fantastic presentation from a retailer who was actually selling glasses on our website, and the choice of what glasses you get shown, and even what type of model you get shown, is totally automated by the AI. So it'll quickly work out if you're going to be more likely to buy the glasses if it's on a kind of on an artificially created blonde girl of 25 or a grey old man of 57, and it'll just do that automatically. So the whole shopping process becomes intrinsically kind of personalized by the AI. And I look at that and I'm going, wow, that is going to make a massive difference. I'm sure grocery shop websites are quite a way off that at the moment, but the tech is now there. Can you imagine you go to a supermarket website to do your online shop and find the whole thing utterly curated around you and your needs? That's not far off.
And Roger, to wrap up our episode, in addition to your work as CEO of Shopper Intelligence, you are the founder of the SenseCheck tool, aimed at small business that don't have the budget to use Shopper Intelligence solutions. Tell us a little about this and what interesting things you've noticed in the consulting services that could be a broad tip for all small business owners.
SenseCheck was born out of my personal experience trying to grow Shopper Intelligence. It's really nothing to do with Shopper Intelligence, other than the fact Shopper Intelligence is a small business facing small business problems, particularly with marketing. So I was thinking to myself, how do small businesses get better at marketing? They can't afford high levels of market research. They can't afford expensive agencies. They're often doing marketing on their own. And the problem that I've got more and more interested in is this problem that you're too close to your own product to be able to do great marketing for it. And my point is this, that if you know inside out everything you're trying to say and everything about your product, and then you're trying to design marketing, it's almost inevitable you will get it wrong, because your brain, your biases, what you know gets in the way of being able to look at a piece of marketing and go, that's good. The only people who can judge marketing well are the people who don't already know your business, because they're like your customers. Marketing has to be the thing that reaches out and connects with the customer. So my idea was pretty straightforward, was that in the absence of having money to do a lot of normal marketing work that big companies do, why don't we just create a micro marketing advice service? So we have retained a panel. It's now over 120 so marketing advisors, and they're all people with 10, 15 years more marketing experience, many of them in small businesses. And all they do is you show them your piece of marketing. It could be a website page, it could be a piece of point of sale, it could be a packaging, and they'll just, from a completely objective outside point of view, they don't know anything about your business, they don't know why you've done what you've done. They'll look at it like a customer would and go, here's my observation about maybe what works, maybe what doesn't work so well, how you could improve it, or in fact just tell you that's great and crack on with it. And I think the underlying benefit to a small business owner or even a marketing person, small business, is just that reassurance. It's like it's very difficult and very stressful doing marketing on your own. There's lots of money at stake and the business growth is at stake. Marketing is really important, right? But to do that on your own, stuck on your own, just living in your own bubble 24/7 is almost impossible to do it well. And that was my problem with shopper intelligence. Every time I tried to describe it to someone in marketing, I did a terrible job. And, you know, I could put my hand up and go, I'm just really bad at this stuff. And it's mainly because I love shopper intelligence so much and I'm so involved in it. It's hard for me to actually describe it in a powerful way to the outside. So sense check's just that. You know, you get 5 panelists giving you a second opinion on your marketing to help you get it, make it better or avoid mistakes. And there's nothing like that in the world. And I think there's like 20 million small businesses in the world who probably can't afford marketing research and probably don't have much by way of agencies. If you think about the pyramid of business, the bottom tier is the vast majority of companies. And I think they're the ones that need the most help with marketing. And it's often their personal cash too. So get it wrong. And I know from you write a check for £5,000 and get nothing back. It really, really hurts. So helping those businesses in a new way was what inspired me. As I say, really nothing to do with shopper intelligence, more about my experience as a small business owner.